Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Eric Vaughn and Jason White here with Auditmation. The purpose of today's session is to introduce you to the Auditmation Lab by providing an overview and a demonstration of our Zero Trust use case within our audit automation platform. So why are we here? With the introduction of memorandum M2209 by the OMB, we now all know that Zero Trust architecture is a requirement. But the question that we actually aim to answer for you today is, how do we verify it? If we're trusting no one and nothing, to us, that means you also can't trust the tools or the processes that are in place to realize Zero Trust architecture either. So what we propose is that Zero Trust auditing is actually required to verify Zero Trust architecture. The good news is that kind of everything lines up to be able to do that with the right tools and systems. And what I mean by that is that Zero Trust requirements already persist as controls. When you think about things like access management or identity management, there's already controls in place across a multitude of frameworks from NIST to FedRAMP to you name it, that govern the appropriate way to implement those controls and those actions. And every single control is actually achieved through a very specific implementation plan. So we take identity management in the context of what the best practice is, and we've implemented it this way across these systems. So that also means that the data required to validate the control effectiveness of each of those actually lives in source systems and can be accessible today. So the opportunity exists to machine validate the control implementation, what we're going to refer to today as context, via direct access to the source systems where evidence lives. That entire process must be validated, which ultimately ends up being an audit. The problem is that government has traditionally had a massive audit scale problem. If we just look at CMMC, for example, 300,000 members in the DIB, and if we think about how long it's taken just to get a handful of assessors certified to be able to actually enforce CMMC, it kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. And there's really some core issues that have to be addressed, right? Number one, there's no standardized model, and we have no ability to get direct access to the truth that we need. It's via spreadsheets, it's via screenshots, things that there's not a high level of data integrity, if you will. And overall, we're trying to combat real-time risk with one-time assessments. And part of the problem is that we've got auditor and cyber skills gaps out there. There's no way to centralize that logic in a way that scales. And from an overarching perspective, you mix all that with increasing threat vector and impact. Seems like new reports come out every single year that things are only getting worse. And so the reality is that the traditional path of self-attested human-dependent audits ultimately fall short. And that's why we've created the Auditmation data platform with the core objective to bring mission objectives together with real-time machine-validated data. So what Auditmation is an IT audit and risk platform that enables any two parties to come together in a neutral, mechanized, or automated data room that bypasses all people, processes, and tools, specifically to ensure forensic grade data from the time we collect it through the time we collaborate and ultimately make risk-based decisions. And that's coming to fruition ultimately in three forms. Number one, you'll see in the demonstration from Jason today, that we're automating evidence collection directly from the source systems where this data lives. We're then comparing that to a massive logic library, which can take shape in two ways. One, we've got a public library that can really help to accelerate velocity with pre-validated, pre-created context against a multitude of frameworks, almost every major one out there. But if there's actually logic that needs to be automated that doesn't already exist in the library today, you'll see that we give our clients and our partners the ability to go in and create and centralize their own logic in a single place to really get scale and hit that skills gap and problem right in the face. And then thirdly, we're collecting data, we're combining that against an auditor context or third-party logic to be able to get to a truth of a specific party. And then we're able to connect that to what we call the ecosystem. So all of the parties and all of the tools that are part of a risk pool, if you will. So we package a data catalog of OSCAL ready results that can be integrated and pushed to things like risk quant, vendor management tools, the GRCs like an Archer and EMAS, for example. So you get single truth stitched through all of the different components of where that truth needs to live. And the culmination of all of this is that we're enabling trusted, consistent validation of zero trust architecture in minutes versus months. And I want to just take a second to make that point clear. We are not a zero trust architecture tool. We don't do logging. We don't do multi-factor authentication. There are all kinds of amazing tools out there that are already doing that. We're the tool that's actually validating that the pieces and processes that are put in place to achieve a zero trust architecture are actually working and continue to work at the speed of the risk that's coming against you. So what is the value of automated auditing of a zero trust architecture? We see the consistent assessment and machine validation of a zero trust architecture against control effectiveness, something that's very defined, very clear, and communicatable across all different parties. We're being able to do that and have that consistency across any agency, supply chain, or cloud service provider that is the scope of the audit, if you will, with no operational burden on staff, right? So saving millions of hours and allowing C3PAOs against the 300,000 members of the DIB to be able to scale up that quick based off a centralized set of logic, and all at the speed of enemy threat campaigns, right? This whole concept of once a year, 10% population audits when hackers and our enemies are working 24/7 around the clock is a massive gap that we believe our platform helps to fill for the government. And we do all of this by basically tech enabling any auditing party, right? Anyone who has oversight or cares about the zero trust architecture actually being validated and working within the scope of an audit. And in order to do that, by tech enabling any auditor, we really are able to drive scale and zero trust velocity across all of government. So that auditing party could be a 3PAO, a C3PAO, could be an inspector general, it could be an internal auditor, a criminal investigator. We'll talk about some different use cases, but ultimately that's the who of our platform, being able to take logic from a party who cares, being able to automate that in a centralized library, and then having a certified auditor and giving them a platform to be able to go get direct access to the truth and independently and neutrally, come back and deliver what those results are. So with one single platform, we're able to deliver unlimited audits, right? And being able to recapture trust and recapture wasted effort for every single party in this ecosystem. We are a neutral party first and foremost. Auditmation is not concerned and is not compensated for any outcome. We don't care what the truth is. We just care about giving you the truth in the context that you want to see it in. And that does a few things. One, it frees the subject of the audit, whether that's a cloud service provider, a member of the DIB, or an actual agency themselves, from having the audit burden, right? Having to go around and manually panhandle for evidence across all the different departments. As Jason will show you today, they set up a boundary, they make their data available, and everybody can come audit it against their logic. But we're also breaking, one of the major issues that to trust that's traditionally existed in this environment is that the auditor has always been aligned with the auditee, right? It's kind of, if you think about a home inspection, when you buy a home, who pays for the inspection? It's the buyer every time, not the seller. Now, the seller has a seller's disclosure. They give their spreadsheet, right, or their security questionnaire. But in every single instance, there are always issues that are found that the buyer or the seller didn't disclose or probably didn't even know about. And that's the right model, right? And we see this as something in the paradigm that needs to be fixed as well. And by putting this neutral platform in place within Auditmation, we're able to actually align the auditing party or the assessor to the party that holds the risk, right? So the assessor could be, again, a 3PAO or an inspector. The party that holds the risk or has oversight, if you will, of that risk could be FedRAMP. It could be the Department of Defense with CMMC. It could be the Office of the Inspector General, right? So we give that balance, if you will, and we believe that we fix the conflict that has always existed within an audit so that we can ultimately get to trusted results. Now, within the technology, what are we actually doing to get there? Well, I mentioned three things earlier. The first thing was direct access to the data. So the data that answers the questions that anybody has lives in a system somewhere. We directly connect to those systems and bring that data into a unified data model where we standardize, normalize, and validate data from a multitude of disparate systems across all of these different parties into a single data model, a single platform. We do that via a graph database, a ton of power there that Jason's going to talk about. But data in and of itself isn't all that helpful. It actually takes context to turn it into information. So where do we get the context from? We ultimately get it from two sources. As we talked about earlier, all of the zero trust architecture requirements persist as controls somewhere. Every one of those controls has a control implementation statement. So the first place we grab context is the policies, the processes, the procedures, and the controls within the audited party first, pull those into our platform. The second area, though, is actually the requirements of the risk holder, right? And that could be as massive as I'm FedRAMP and someone is going for FedRAMP High. That could be I'm the Department of Defense and someone's looking at CMMC level 1 versus a level 2. Or it could be as narrow of what we call a micro audit of, hey, I want to look at these 5 controls around access and identity management to do a quick audit or a check of zero trust within one of my supply chain providers. So those requirements, whatever form they take from the risk holding party, actually will help inform the assessor. And those persist in 2 areas. Number 1, evidence request list. What's the data that I need to see to prove that? And the second piece is the actual test logic. What does desired state look like? What do I want to see? What do I want that answer to be? And based off of that evidence that was collected, is that true or false? So that logic comes into our automated logic library where it gets centralized as a context engine. We apply the logic against the data, and ultimately that gives us machine validated evidence that is forensic grade. It's immutable, as Jason will show today, a full chain of custody from collection to collaboration, a flight recorder, if you will, of everything that happened to prove that nobody tampered with it, nothing was sampled. It is the actual truth that can be validated and trusted. That's what we deliver today. In the future, we'll also add the ability to automate that testing logic. What does desired state look like? Does that environment look like that every single day? Is it a red or is it a green? The output of all those is what we call an audit fact. Those get packaged into that integration-ready data catalog that I touched on, which fulfills the third leg of the mission, which is being able to then take that audit fact that is integration-ready, push that back to the cloud service provider, back to the agency to inform continuous improvement, push that back to the assessing party so that they can actually do their work within their tools. They can review findings and they can make a judgment, and then push all of those results back into the tools that the risk holder may care about. That could be EMAS, that could be risk quantification, or that could be pushing it into an AI/ML platform as an AI/ML data ready, data catalog that's ready for that to actually look into risk analytics and future predictions around what we're doing within a particular provider or across our entire supply chain. So Jason will show all those things today, but the beauty of the platform, again, is what we do at scale. Any auditee, the source of any audit, any assessing party, any risk holder from FedRAMP to CISA to the Department of Defense to the OIG, and also, though, being able to pull data from virtually any place that it lives today and being able to push that data into any of the tools that are required in order to fulfill the mission. And what we see in all this is ultimately the ability to create a new single auditing and reporting standard across the government, a single platform and format that can continually validate cyber readiness. And if we look at this from a linear perspective, right, the start of all of this is the logic. What are you trying to validate? And again, that could be as broad as NIST, RMF, and FedRAMP High, or CMMC at any layer, or it can be as narrow as a zero trust micro audit, or let's just go look at cyber hygiene against the DISA STIGs, for example. That context gets automated into the logic library within Auditmation as that neutral arbiter. The outcomes then go into that data catalog that are human and machine API readable. So meeting the requirements for OSCAL in terms of format today. That data then goes to any assessing party, the ones we mentioned, but again, this could also be a supply chain risk manager within an agency. It could be a criminal investigator for example. And all of that comes together to ultimately fulfill and help enable and validate the data for multiple missions. So we see zero trust audit validation, which we're talking about today, risk mitigation within an agency or within a supply chain, being able to inform and validate and really enable the continuous ATO process, threat-based risk profiling and scoring, and even criminal enforcement, and being able to have machine validated trustworthy data across a multitude of different agencies, missions, you name it, going back to all of those agencies that ultimately have oversight that need better data to make better decisions in real time versus once a year. So how it works, 4 quick things you're going to see. Number 1, connect, right? We actually go in and use set and forget least privileged connections to the source systems that house the data. We have over 120 of those integrations already built today. That grows every single week. Jason will walk you through that. Number 2, automate. Mechanizing our teams by bringing that logic into a centralized library that helps us to overcome turnover risk and also the skills gap. Once we've done those 2 things, merge them together, we can now facilitate 1 or 1,000 automated zero trust audits across unlimited data audit rooms and unlimited parties. And then that opens up the 4th leg of the stool, which is being able to differentiate. And from a government perspective, what I mean is the ability to differentiate these actual supplier risk profiles based on real data for the first time ever. Not a spreadsheet, not an FAQ, not an inconsistent format across a multitude of different assessors, but OSCAL ready actual data from within the environment to know that you've got the truth. So that brings us up to the last piece for me today, which is what are we going to see? Jason's actually going to walk through a specific use case in the demo, bringing all of this together in an example. And that example today is going to be, how do you validate zero trust architecture in an SDLC process across any user, network, system, or device? And what we'll see is that the systems where our data lives in this demo example today, there's 5 of them: ADP, KnowBe4, Azure AD, Jira, and GitHub, which are pretty common among SDLC implementations. But then we also, of course, to validate zero trust, we need to look at the user activity. Who all developed the code? Who all did a peer review? Who all actually merged the code? And then we have to look at the zero trust requirements across those systems and through that user activity. Things like, who are our active employees? Do we have the correct permissions? Do we have the correct security groups? Are we using multi-factor authentication? Are these things documented correctly? Those are the things that we need to know. And what we'll see is the output of all that, the machine validated data that is actually going to inform better decisions on whether we're adhering to zero trust or not, are things, everything from a list of the current employees, what trainings they've completed, who are our active users, what are our security groups, what are our repositories, what are the pull requests, right? Being able to merge all those 2 together in an SDLC process across 2, segmented networks. We have a development network, we have a production network, the pushes between those, but also across 2 different user activities, which are fairly common in government as well. We have the full-time employees within our agency, for example, but then we also have the contractors. And all of these things are going to apply in different ways depending on the network and the users that we're talking about. So with that, I will now pass it over to Jason, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, to actually demonstrate the platform in that use case.
Awesome. Thanks, E. I appreciate that. Let me know, Eric, if you can see my screen. Good?
Good to go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us, everyone. We're excited to be here. What ATARC is doing around zero trust architecture and that the M2209 policy, it's truly remarkable. And I'm happy to come alongside you guys and show you that, Eric just talked about the demo use case. For those of you that are familiar with everything going on in the 12 scenarios that ATARC is publishing, think about scenario 4, right? Looking at those cloud-based services to provide that, what I'll call that SDLC lens across the framework. But Eric mentioned one thing that's pretty funny. Good transition, Eric. I don't know if you realized it, but MFA, right? It wouldn't be a zero trust architecture demo if I didn't start with MFA. So I'm going to log in. And what I want to do here is I want to walk you through the experience. My whole goal here is to, take everything that Eric just brought to you. Now, you'll notice here, I'm logging in with, obviously, single sign-on for me is Microsoft, but you'll notice that if you choose other options, you can sign in with a Windows Hello Key, you can sign in with GitHub, you can sign in with one of the other 7 IDP providers that we have. But I'm just going to quickly log in. I don't need to bore you guys with the details, but I also need to grab my phone and I need to get an SMS and plug that in. And we're cooking with grease, as my buddy and our CEO likes to say. All right, so let's jump right in. Now, to kick us off, I want to just quickly introduce you to the platform. There are 8 apps inside the platform. We're going to interact with many of them today. I'm going to try to maximize the time that we have, but let me give you a high-level overview of them, and then we're going to jump right in. Governance is the app that is all about administration. Connection Manager is all about building pipelines to all of the IT assets that you have using secrets management. Boundary Manager is about defining the scope of the audit. How big, how small do you want the scope of the audit to be? Logic Designer is about either leveraging our catalog that Eric talked about or extending it to create your own public or private catalog, along with the other thousands of folks that are using the Logic Designer every day. The catalog, this is where we're going to start. It's one of my favorite parts, but this is a list of all the products and API operations that we have in the catalog today and a list of the backlog, right? It's important that you guys see the scale that we're driving towards here. Then where do we store that data, right? We collect all that data using those data pipelines. Now we're going to store that in our audit graph database. And I'm actually going to spend a pretty good amount of time here because it's so central to the story around managing the SDLC process and validating the SDLC process. Because what did Eric say? The audit graph database is a unified data model to standardize, normalize, and validate data. I'm going to walk you through all of that. And then the 2 fun parts for the auditee and the auditor. The Audit Manager is where the auditee is going to set up the audit. Now, remember, whether you define auditee as an insurer, if you define auditee as the person who's providing the data, the assessment is where the auditor is going to live, right? And I'll talk about evidence request list. We'll talk about boundaries and how those 2 come together to create an audit. And I think you'll really see when we start talking about scale and efficiency, it really blows up there. Let's start with the catalog. And I will tell you guys, when we started this venture and having a rich foundation to start with, and we didn't go into company history and background, and that's okay. We can do that with you guys one-off. But what we found is the world of IT compliance and the assets where IT compliance data lives is enormous, right? In our total purview today, you can see at the very bottom right-hand side, we have 581 different products that we know compliance data lives, right? Now, across those, you're going to say, okay, well, I know that in a typical IT audit, we're going to go in and we have to pull information from our HR systems, right? So we're going to have to pull in Active Directory, which is part of our story that we'll talk about in a bit, right? So let's go take a look at all the Active Directory stores that we have. Let's go look at, the list kind of goes on and on, but one thing is important, and Eric mentioned it a little bit. What are we not? We are not, an outside-in security scorecard, right? We are not a GRC, right? We are an audit data platform focusing on reducing risk across the enterprise at scale, okay? So when you see things like all of the different apps that we're integrating to or that we have integrated with, just kind of keep in mind that, that list grows literally every single day, right? Every single day, our customers come in and they just simply hit add new product. Now, in scenario 4 of ATARC, we talk about cloud-based solutions. And keep in mind, whether it's cloud-based, whether it's on-prem, whether it's homegrown, as long as there's an applicable API that we can hit, we can build connectivity to it, okay? So, what we tell customers all the time is get all your products into that. That's where we got that 581 from. And again, as I mentioned, that list grows every single week. Now, when you understand things like all of the products, and like just take AWS as an example, I mean, there's 134 products inside AWS that we know we've got to go build integrations to. But if you filter that down to active, we've built integrations to 33 of them. So we have more runway to go build to complete AWS. But when you think about everything that we're doing active, right now we have in the catalog 113, you see down here at the very, very bottom, 113 products that if an agency, if a enterprise, if a customer started today, they would have the ability to create a data pipeline to all 113 of these applications, use the logic library to start using bots to go fetch data from every single one of these. Okay. Now we'll talk about bots in just a second. We'll talk about queries in just a second, but where it all comes back to is let's take a look at what we call operations. So across those 113 different products, right? We have, the list grows every day, 4,144 data elements that we've made available to you that you can add to a collector or request in a collector that literally are available now. 4,144 fields, column fields. Okay. It is an unbelievably growing, expansive list of connectivity options you have to say, you know what, if you want to go and look for RDS as an example, you can come in and look at, or EC2, search it all you want, but there's, an unbelievable library to start with. Now, here's the thing that I think just really blows me away. If you think about all 581 possible connections that we're building towards every single week, we add 2 or 3 more, sometimes 4 when we get lucky, new integrations to the catalog. There's 28,624 total fields that we know we can ultimately unlock for our customers, right? That's the most expansive list of compliance-based, API operations and fields collection known to man, right? And at least known to this man, I should say. So just, when I tell customers about that, they get so excited about realizing in a matter of minutes, right? You can literally go from logging in on our website to pulling data into their own unique instance of the Audit Graph database, right? Where we're storing those objects. So the art of the possible is amazing, but let's talk about a little, and Eric mentioned this, frameworks, because equally we are building a comprehensive set of frameworks that our customers can extend as well. We'll talk about that extension in the Logic Designer in a minute, but kind of get your head around this, right? So in this example, NIST 853, FedRAMP, ISO, SCF, you name it, SOC 2, right? We can drill in. So in NIST 853 Rev 5, we can come in and we can see, we've got a list of all the enhancements, right? So when we start thinking about our customers can literally take a list off the shelf of NIST 853, go start collecting data through the data pipeline, and literally start answering the evidence requirements that are on the shelf, or what we call out of the box, immediately. Okay. And you can see all the different revs, and you can see, of course, FedRAMP, or if you're a SOC 2 going and trying to get a SOC 2, I'll show you this in just a second when we get to our evidence request list. But I think in one particular example, we have 446 different pieces of evidence that we're collecting for a SOC 2 audit. Now, you may not need them all because you may not be doing every TSC, right? But the idea is the library has them. They're there for you. Okay. So that's a little bit about connectivity, right? Where do we get all of our data? Let's talk about where data is stored, though. And this Audit Graph database, I have a hard time. I'm not that technical. You guys will see that. Eric makes fun of me from time to time about it, but I'm blown away at the value the Audit Graph database provides for our customers. And I read an article, it's been a number of months ago now, that AWS said 60% of a compliance team's time are spent collecting evidence, literally going around to ADP and asking the HR leader for content, going to the AWS CloudWatch logs and saying, can I get this last 17 days of logs, going to Elastic File System, going to Azure Active Directory, going to GitHub. Think about how many IT source systems are involved in either you auditing a party, right? Or a party auditing you. That list of 581, you can kind of see how quickly that thing can grow. But the value here is this. We're not just solving the millions of hours, as Eric stated, of efficiencies gained on the auditee side. But I would tell you, my personal opinion is that AWS article equally, that 60% number, equally can be saved on the inefficiencies on the auditing party side. Whether you're a C3PAO, whether you're an IG, whether you're an internal auditor, whether you're a C3PAO, you should equally be able to take advantage of that time savings because we've standardized the data in a way that you can have easy access to it. Now, in this example, I'm going to pick on GitHub. We're talking about SDLC here, and I'm going to show you a full SDLC audit in just a second. But what I want to focus in on is, let's talk about GitHub and the role GitHub plays in my demo of the SDLC process. And you can see we're capturing a lot of data here. We've got a bunch of branches because we have a bunch of repositories. We've got a bunch of pull requests, as you can see. But I'm a bit of a graphical guy. I don't know about you guys, but I like to see things in pretty pictures. So take a look at this. With one click, I can drill in, I can see a list of all the pull requests. Now, I will tell you, I am not a GitHub expert. I don't participate. Well, that's actually not true. I do a little bit on the SDLC side here at Auditmation in terms of approvals into production. But what I know is we have a list of pull requests. Pull requests are saying, hey, I took a piece of code, I brought it into my dev environment, right? I brought it into my network, into my dev environment. Maybe I'm using a GFE, maybe I'm using my own personal device, whatever those rules of engagement are, I'm pulling that down. And then when I'm ready to push that back to the mothership or to the main branch of the repository, I need to get other people involved in that process, right? So let me show you real quickly. I'm going to pick on one of our teams here, our collector bot team, and I'm going to pick on GCP Secrets Manager. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart, but don't get scared because it is so powerful. It's truly one of my favorite views in terms of explaining the value of a graph database as it relates to compliance and the auditing experience, okay? So first and foremost, if you see kind of right in the middle, and let me blow this up for you a little bit. This is our collector bot 982 GCP Secrets Management pull request, okay? This is the activity. It's saying, hey, we have this GCP Secrets Manager code that I need to get pulled in back to the mothership, right? We have this huge repository. And by the way, you can see here are the other 165 pull requests that are ongoing, right? The whole idea of a pull request is to take that code out of QA, out of my dev cycle, get it in and get it back to the mothership, get it back to the repo. But what are all the steps that are involved with that, right? Because, days are gone where you can just say, hey, I wrote a piece of code, let me throw it into prod, right? Well, what happened here is Osvaldo, who's one of our great developers, he created the pull request. But when he did that, GitHub either automatically, depending on how you set it up, or Osvaldo selected the reviewers, his peers, to come in and review the changes, right? And when you did that, Vaughn has been invited. He's made a couple of change requests and made a couple of comments. Daniel has also been a peer that has been invited. But I want to focus on my good buddy Christine over here, okay? And Christy, what the idea is, if we drilled into Christy, we can see all the details about who he is and all of the information relative to that particular user, right? So an auditor, think about an auditor. An auditor who wants to come in and view your SDLC is not thumbing through spreadsheets anymore. They're not thumbing through screenshots. They have the power at their fingertips to see every single step in the SDLC process that took that piece of code from dev on a different network, done by a contractor, all the way through the SDLC back to the main branch. And by the way, you can see here, Mr. Moldo is in fact a contractor, right? I'm in the customer, right? I'm Auditlocity, that's the corp, and Dev Supply is a contractor to us. So let's take a look at what he actually did though. We document in one single unified repository every comment, every step in the SDLC process. So the first thing you'll see is Mr. Moldo said, hold on, I want to suggest a wait. The second thing he said, let's use an unexpected error form from Dev Supply. And the last thing he did before he approved it, he said, let's pass the method parameters as ID name instead of UUID. These steps all occurred in GitHub. And I'm a bit of a show me state kind of guy. So what I thought I would do, and this is the first time I've done it this way, but I thought it would really make sense for you guys. Zero trust architecture is truly about not trusting. So don't trust me that this data came from GitHub. Let me prove it, right? So again, I mentioned I'm not a GitHub expert, but I'll tell you, just coming in and seeing that we've got a bunch of our collector bots. These are our collector bot teams. That's the repo that we were focused on. Let me drill into pull requests. And as you saw earlier, we got a boatload of them. A lot of them have been closed, which is great. But I'm going to go into that same collector bot pull request. And when I drill into it, remember the guys we were just talking about: Razwan, Christy, Daniel. I didn't mention my good friend Mr. Thomas, but he's here as well. Caitlin's here. And you'll see Mr. Moldo's already approved it. Now, there's other approvals that need to go on. That's why the ticket is still open. But take a look at what Mr. Moldo's done. Right here are the three steps. The first one was he suggested a change. Here are the details behind that change. Right. The second thing that he did is he said, let's use the unexpected error from Dev Supply. And the last thing, again, with the appropriate details. And the last thing he said is, Let's pass the method parameters as ID scheme instead of UUID. Guys, think about every piece. Now, this starts at Xero. We'll talk about that in just a second, but this is just the GitHub piece. The power of getting this information. Think about an auditor, right? Put your auditing hat on, whether you're internal, you're external, you're a vendor manager. What if you had to learn? What if I said, I'm out of the evidence request delivery business as an auditee? Here's a login to GitHub. Go ahead, Mr. Auditor. Here's a login to Jira. Here's a login to ADP. Here's a login to Azure Active AD. Next thing you know, that auditor's got to learn 581 applications. And they also have to give them that auditor a license. They've got to onboard them. They've got to offboard them. The cost of that is, and obviously, right, I'm giving you kind of the broadest pain, but just think about that poor auditor. We literally give them a unified data experience that lets them graphically see, and I'm going to show this to you in a table in a minute, but lets them graphically see every single step that happened to get that pull request back into the main branch, get it back into production, and everything is rocking and rolling. It's all right here. And oh, by the way, the next thing I could do, because what does an auditor do? They go in, they sample 10% of the population once a year. We think that should be 100% of the population every day. That's a different story. But I could just come in and pick a different pull request, right? Make that my center of the universe, and I'm rocking and rolling. So I wanted to start there. Power of the graph is linking all these objects together, getting them from different user experiences, putting them in the platform, and allowing you to traverse those the way you want to traverse them. But let me give you a simplified example as well. I don't want to just make you go, oh my gosh, that's the most powerful, wow, I can never do that. What about something as simple as identity access management, right? Everybody's got to prove your password policy. In fact, I was on with an insurer the other day, a cyber insurer, and I literally printed the cyber insurance policy. And in section B, under 19, computer systems access protection, it's like, hey, do you have passwords containing at least 8 characters? Do they contain a mix of letters? You guys have all seen these, right? You guys have all seen the questionnaires that come in. Well, I can simply just go put, hopefully people are being true, but I could put, yep. What we do is we bring you truth, right? If you have a security questionnaire, you simply create an evidence request, which I'll talk about in just a second. And you can go and you can say, okay, for this policy, right, a much more simplified view, we're not looking at all the connectivity, but what we're looking at is the value of the data. Look at the right-hand side. Do you allow users to change passwords? Nope. Are expire passwords true? Yep. Max password age, password length, password reuse, false, lowercase, numbers, right? We don't tell you whether this context is good, right? We don't tell you today that, 6, no, you need 8. No, you need 10, right? We simply give the auditing party the truth. And again, remember, auditing being big audit, meaning a customers audit you every day, right? I came from a small software startup that we grew into the Gartner Magic Quadrant leader in project portfolio management over a 19-year career. And, we got 300, 400 security questionnaires that had 200-300 questions in them every year, right? Everybody's seen these things. But what people don't have is a in-flight data recorder. What do I mean by that? Have these values always been 6? Has our max password age always been 95, or has somebody changed them? Did they do that nefariously? Maybe not. Did somebody make a mistake? What we are giving you guys and all of our customers is the ability to come in and audit every single one of those fields, every single one of those API operations. If it changes, we give you a timeline view of when it changed and the full chain of custody, which I'll talk about in just a second, of that change. So in this case, you can see on July 7th is the first day that I ran this particular AWS IAM password policy bot. I can see, these were the values then. I can see what they were on July 12th, but take a look, right? We went from, let me back up. We went from 8, right, to 24, to having required lowercase letters, required numbers, require symbols, require uppercase characters. Good sound password policy. All the way to fast forward to July 28th, those values changed, right? Here's a full chain of custody that is OSCAL ready, machine readable, that tells you a step-by-step of instructions on where that data and how that data was collected. Don't believe us. Zero trust means zero trust. Believe the data, because a machine collected it. It is forensic grade. It is immutable. You can't change it, right? Soon we'll bring a blockchain story to that it's just an unbelievably sound process that says we know every single step of how those data objects were collected. And we provide those to an auditing party for their review. So they trust, right? They don't trust, they see it, they understand it, they see where the data came from. So, all right. Sorry, I know that was long-winded, but I wanted the power of the graph is so unique and so special. It is truly the fundamental part of the value of the platform is we store data, we give you access to that normalized data across any product that you want to build a data pipeline to, and you're off and running. Okay. But remember what Eric said, the connectivity to the products is one part of it, but the logic and the logic library, right? Where do we know what data fields we want to capture? How do I think about my security questionnaire? And how do I automate that? How do I mechanize that? You do that in what we call the logic designer. Now, I'm going to kind of speed up a little bit because I want to be sensitive to your time here. The logic designer starts at an evidence request list. It's your security questionnaire, right? In this case, I started with ATAC scenario 4, right? Contracted employees and systems for cloud-based ERLs. We'll talk about what this means in just a second, but take a look at something like a SOC 2. You remember I said there were 446 evidence requests. You can simply come in and here's my 446 pieces of evidence that we're going to ask an auditee to provide. By the way, there's already bots created for many of them, right? You can create your own bots, extend this logic, but you can also simply just import this from a file, right? If you've got a security questionnaire, right, we'll put it in a structured format, simply import it, right? It can start as simple as that. You don't have to manually create this, import it, right? But once you get that evidence request list, and by the way, we're going to focus on our ATAC scenario 4 example here in a minute when we go create an audit. But you can see, right, auditors, you have full NIST, you have FedRAMP moderate. You can create as many of these as you choose, right? You extend the library. You start with what we have in the catalog. Our collective customer base adds new queries, bots, and evidence requests every single day. That list grows, exponentially. This is probably the highest scale of the application because you're not just relying on us to sit here and provide this content. You can add to it. The next customer can add to it. An agency can add to it. A C3PAO can add their own requirements to it, et cetera. But the foundational element of logic is queries. And let me just, I always say, let me demystify the word query for you. I am not a technologist. I happen to end up, being a part of a software organization for the last 22 years, but I don't build it. I don't develop it. I heard the word query and I ran for the wind, right? Then I saw in a demo, our CISO, Chris Martell, who's preparing us to take us through the eye of the needle for every framework you can think of. But he showed me a list of coming in and building a know before training query, right? And know before is a big part of the story we'll talk about in just a second. And he showed me how you can come in and you can just say, okay, I want to go look at know before, but in this case, I want to see just those employees that have passed due trainings, right? So I want to know, who do I need to go bother to get to go take those courses before the auditor gets there? And I thought about it, I'm like, wow, that's super cool. But then what I also thought about is look at all of the options, right? So if I just quickly to go in and let's look at another example here, GitHub. Okay. And maybe I want to look at those pull request approvals. Remember I said who was one of the approvals for our 982, right? Just running this in our query designer. We're giving you, with very, very limited technology chops needed, we're giving you the ability to create and run your own queries, create them as bots, deploy them, and use them as an audit. And you can do it in seconds, right? And you'll see here's our collector bot 982. Remember the GCP Secrets Manager? And we can see C. Moldo, my good friend, Mr. Moldo, was the person who, in fact, when you drill into it, was the person who marked it as approved, or one of the people who marked it as approved if you have a multi-approval step. So just want to give you a little bit of context. But now let me show you how to build one real quick, because the power of the graph continues to follow me, right? Whoops, I'm not going to create a bot from there. I want to create a new query. Now, in this example, I'm just going to stick to that know before use case, but know before training, right? And what we can do is we can come in and just using simple examples here. Here's the unbelievable value for you, okay? I can come in, I can say AWS EC2. Well, here's all of the data fields that we capture for EC2, right? If I want to go to GCP, right? I simply just come in and say, what do we have for GCP? Well, here's all the products and all of the, look at the scroll. all those 4,144, if I remember correctly, every one of those fields can be the foundation of a query or can be included in a query, right? So if you want to go Azure, you just start typing Azure, and now you can come in and see there's Azure AD. Let's go create a query for Azure AD. It's all right here in your fingertips, right? So let's just real quickly, just to show you, I'm going to create a quick query. And by the way, I literally taught myself how to do this in less than 10 minutes, right? I just watched a little video of Chris doing it, and 10 minutes later, I'm off and running. I'm building my own queries. So the first thing we want to know is about these training records is who the users are. We want to know their enrollment status. We want to know the date they completed it, right? And we want to know their test result. There we go, right? Whoops. Oh, anyways, you don't need to see me write a bunch of queries, but all I have to do is hit save. And just like that, you've got the power of the graph database at your fingertips. In seconds, you can start building queries without having to be a technologist, right? In 10 minutes, you can train yourself. I can train you in 1, right? I mean, it's that easy. But I wanted to demystify that for you. You don't have to be a super duper programmer here. In fact, what we also do is if you make a mistake, we're going to tell you along the way, hey, you don't need that parenthesis there, right? So it's context sensitive to the graph database. It's giving you all that power, but it's also going to help you along the way as you learn and get more efficient at building queries. Okay, last thing here, and then we're going to get to the last 2 pieces, which are the boundary manager, and then go create and run an audit. I want to talk about bots. Bots are the coming together of 3 things, okay? And I'll just take one, Azure AD, multi-factor, MFA. We're going to show this one in just a second. MFA is built of 3 things. First, it's built of a query, right? That defines what the data elements are that we want to bring from Azure AD. It is married to what we call part of our Rosetta Stone, our secret sauce is an evidence definition, which normalizes all the auditor's requests that come in from all different parties. And then it's made up of a framework. In this case, it's NIST 853 Rev 5, access enforcement, AC3, right? It could be a control, it could be a family, it could be an enhancement. But the idea is it's those 3 things. I need a query. I need to know what evidence definition we're going to pull back from it. And I need to know what framework it supports. Now, and by the way, a bot can support more than one framework, of course. But now this bot is ready for the world, right? There's a publishing process. You can see it's been published. We do want to validate the quality of everything that is created by our collective. So there's a publishing, little small SDLC that we go through to say, yes, it's ready to go to the rest of the collective group. But that's it. That's all you need to know. Create a query, map it to what evidence you want to bring back, tell me what framework it is, and you're done. The bot repository grows daily, right? It literally grows daily. You can create one, leave it as a draft, work on it as you want to go, right? Come back in, publish it, etc. But that's the foundational elements of it. Okay, so now what have we done? You know the idea of the data pipelines to all the products that we can connect to, right? And the pipeline that we're going to build to that. You know the frameworks, right? You know the graph database and the power of the graph and exploring that database based on who you are, what role you play, and what you're trying to consume. Now you understand kind of logic designer starts with an evidence request list, go build queries, go check out queries or use queries that have already been published, sample the bots, take from the library, create your own, done. It all culminates in now creating the audit, okay? And what I want to do is I want to introduce you to the scope of an audit. How do you define how big, how narrow, how wide you want access to your information? Because remember, this is your objects. These are your data points. It's your content. It's your context. What you have the ability to do is to come in and say, hey, for my Xero Trust change management boundary, I've got 12 products in it, right? Maybe a cyber forensic assessment boundary, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. Hopefully you never need one of those. But if you've got a cyber response forensic investigation going on, maybe you're only doing it across 3 of the products that are in your boundary because those are the only 3 that were impacted. I don't know, right? If you have an internal audit, you want to capture all your products. The idea is this, right? I can go in and look at a boundary, and a boundary consists of 3 things, right? It's the framework that you want to attest to, right? In this case, it's NIST 853. It's the products that you're including in the scope of the boundary. So what are the products that you want to say, yes, Mr. Auditor, Mrs. Auditor, again, no matter who you are, IG, right, C3PAO, any auditing party, I'm going to give you access to these products. And the third piece is I'm going to give you access to these evidence bots. Here's all the evidence records that we're going to collect, marry against your evidence request list automatically, and you're off and running. Okay, but it's easy in a demo for you. Again, zero trust, right? It's easy for me to just show you a really cool set of bots that have already been collected. But the idea is this. Let me show you how that happens. Let me show you how you build. Our whole goal here from a query, build it once, use it 1,000,000 times. An evidence request list, build it once, use it 1,000 times. Right? A bot, build it once, use it 100 times for 1,000 different customers, whatever, right? Think about a boundary, build it once, and you can create as many audits off that boundary as you choose. So let's take my little SDLC example here. In this case, we have five products, right? But when I'm coming in, I'm going, you know what? My auditor just came back and asked, they want to also include your SDLC. They want to have Xero data in here as well. I simply just come in, I pick Xero from the product library, right? I come in, I give it a connection. A connection is what specific set of secrets are you going to provide that user, right? What data? Is it at one specific database? Is it one specific user group? Is it one specific application? Is it one database with 1,000,000 PII records that they just say, hey, I'm a customer, you have my data, prove to me every day that the data is encrypted. Prove to me that your employees have gone through the appropriate security awareness training. Prove you're using MFA, right? In this case, I'm just going to say, I want to use that connection and take a look at how cool this is. I feel a little dorky. I say that word. I need to get a better word than cool. Powerful, awesome. I don't know, awesomeness. But take a look at this, right? What we do that is so unique to Auditmation is we take the framework that you care about, that you want to build the scope of this audit around. We take the products you've included, and remember the bots. Remember, it was made up of those three things: queries, frameworks, products, right? Watch this. I'm simply going to hit run scan, and automatically it brings back, in this case, 24 bots that are available for me to go use for this audit against those products. You literally, and I'm going to show you this right now. You can go build an audit, a brand new audit in seconds that pulls in every evidence record from all 24 of these bots aligned to a complete scenario for SDLC process, and you're done. You can create an audit in a minute, and you can be auditing any party in seconds. The months of waiting with the back and forth of the evidence request list and what are you looking for? How are you doing it? What information you need? That's not the right data. I need this. That is done, guys. It's done, right? Now, again, I'm getting excited. Sorry. Let's hit the last two things. I'm going to wrap it up. And if we have questions, we'll certainly want to take those. Audits. Again, two parties coming together to prove a particular control is effective, or a group of controls are effective, right? Now, what we do know is this: you get audited and our customers get audited from all kinds of parties, right? And in fact, let me just give you an example. I don't need a dictionary here. In this, whoops, sorry, I timed out. I guess that's actually a good example of security. But in this time example, I'm using GitHub. Wait, did that work? There we go. Sorry about that. So the idea is this, right? When you come in and you see all the parties that can audit you, your customers audit you, your insurance company audits you, your forensic investigator that may have to come in and audit you, and why? Look at this one stat. I'm only going to show you one stat, right? Or one infographic here. The Ponemon report that came out recently said, right, 56% of incidents just are simply good people making mistakes, right? Adobe, I think it was, had a $8.9 billion market cap hit or something like that when a breach occurred because of a privacy setting on a S3 storage bucket. I think it was. I might not have that exactly right. But look at this. 26% of incidents are relating to criminal insider. Remember the password policy, somebody moving it from 6 to 8 or 8 to 6 and true to false? I mean, maybe that was accidents, maybe not, right? So the idea is you have a bunch of different parties auditing you, and you've got to have the ability to come in and prepare the same very experience, right? This is one common user experience that allows anybody in the auditing community that wants to audit you, they have the same experience, right? Right. And so what we'll talk about here is maybe we'll say, what if this is a customer audit, right? And what would a customer do? A vendor management audit, right? Or a C3PAO, you name it. But let's go back to our main use case here. So realizing that you've got a lot of folks that are auditing you. Now, what does an audit manager do, right? Today, an audit manager is running around, hat in hand, collecting evidence from all of those different source systems that we talked about. Tomorrow, right, with implementing Auditmation, they're in a management role. Now, I'm also not suggesting that every single piece of data in an audit you can always automate, or maybe that even makes sense to automate. An employee whistleblower policy and checking that your employee handbook has that in it. You probably don't want to automate that. Could you? Sure. Do you want to? Maybe not, right? But as an auditor, as an auditee, take a look at this, right? I'm simply watching the process, right? And let's take our Zero Trust change management assessment that's ongoing here, right? An audit is made up of three things: a boundary, the Zero Trust change management assessment boundary, the scope of the audit. Again, the framework, right? What framework are we using? What evidence request list are we using? And the last is the actual evidence pieces themselves. Okay. What an audit manager does now as an auditee, right? I'm just sitting back and saying, hey, we've got 19 pieces of evidence. We got 11 awaiting review. 8 of them are done. I'm just waiting for my auditor to wrap up. Now we have a Q&A process, right? We have the ability to allow the auditor to submit findings and observations. But the idea is really simple. Let's go look at through the lens of an auditee, right? So if an auditee is looking at this simply and saying, hey, let me know when I'm done, or let me know if you have any issues, because I'm going to be focused on my results tab, and I'm going to be focused on managing all of my audit cycles that are ongoing, right? I came from a world where we had 6 products. We had 6 SOC 2s that we had to go through. We had to get ISO, we had to get FedRAMP, and we were a sleepy 1,000-person software company in Austin, Texas. How many audits do you go through? How many audits do your customers manage every day, right? The risk stakeholder, the risk pool is huge. Everybody wants their truth. That's what we give them. We just do it for you automatically, right? We put you in, you can be audited in your sleep. Now, don't be scared, right? Because you know what the data looks like. You've prepared for it. You've gone through this process, but it's available to you. Let me switch hats. Let's go look at a customer, right? And what if a customer said, you know what, I want to go finish up that audit, right? Or I want to go, you know what, in fact, why don't we do this? Let me show you, let me do that. I changed my mind. Let me show you what that audit experience looks like real quickly. So let's come into the auditor, right? And I'm going to go into my Zero Trust change management process. Here's the story. This is the scenario that we built out for scenario 4. Now, again, I think we got pretty darn close, right? You saw things like contractors involved and development environments versus prod environments versus networks. Follow this flow. First thing that we're going to do as part of our ATARC check on auditing Zero Trust from a SDLC perspective is show me a list of all the employees in our HR system. Have they been trained, right? This is all know before, but if you drill into any one of these, the evidence bots are there for you, right? So we can go in and say, okay, bring me back all my employees from ADP. Okay, cool. That's a start. Now we have all of our employees. We can see critical information about them. Again, we have the chain of custody for every single record that we look through. We know exactly when it was created and how it was created, right? But if you think about the whole story, it starts in HR, but then you go through training. Then you compare that against lists of users in AD. You make sure you understand who has privileged accounts. You make sure you understand who has groups and what permissions are in those groups, who's a member in each of those groups, all coming from AD. Then you showed me a list of the environments. And in fact, we'll come back to this in just a second. You go in and say, okay, now I know who all my correct and active users are in AD and in HR. I know they've been trained, but are they using MFA? All the way down to show me a list of all of my Jira users and my Jira projects and my issues for all of those epics, right? All the way down to GitHub. And then last, let me pull my screen up for you. Now show me a list of all the pull requests, show me peer reviews that have occurred, the big graph I showed you earlier. And now tell me that the person who merged the code is not the person who submitted it, right? Created it. So that's kind of the full process, right? Looking at contractors, looking at environments along the way. But just look at this, right? If I go in and say, you know what, I want to look at my security awareness training. There's 2 things that you see here. One is all my employees have to take the regular one, but maybe my development team has to take a role-based one, right? They come in, they look at their evidence results, right? They run that security awareness training. Now an auditor in seconds can see 446 different security awareness training sessions have occurred. But I can kind of go through here and I can see, some, we're doing pretty well. Most of them have passed. If I wanted to go sample them, I could simply go in and choose which ones I want to sample, right? And if I will find one or two that perhaps didn't pass, right, I could come in and I can review that chain of custody. I could also create a result. I could say I found that, patient XYZ, John, didn't pass this test. I could create an observation. Okay. I can create a recommendation that says you should probably go back and get a couple of these people to retake that module because they failed. Right. The idea is the interaction is all automated. The auditor sees the population, by the way, 100%. In time, you can see here at the top right, in the next version of the platform, or in the next 2 versions, we're going to give you the ability to create a sample population. So only give me 10%, give me 20%. We believe in 100%, and we believe in every day. We believe audit should be a subscription. They should be a service. Auditors should move to a service model that says, we want to audit you for this particular framework every day, every week, every month, whatever that interval is. It's got to be better. The industry deserves, government deserves, frankly, everybody deserves to know their data is safe every day, not once a year when an auditor comes around. Okay. So going back here and looking at a couple other examples, like drilling in that MFA, right? I can go in and see that, do we have an MFA enabled across all of our employees that are active in the HR system, compared it against the AD list, looked at the users inside Jira, et cetera. And I can come in and I can see that each of them, right, that are all part of Auditmation, they're all using SMS. But what I can also look at is Dan down here, my good buddy. He's actually a contractor. You can see we do that via emails. So Dan Samanka is a contractor, but he's also enrolled in SMS. So whether you're a contractor, whether you're in your own environment, because we use such a strict password enforcement policy, we're using MFA, we've got all of our repos, we know our privilege access, we know our groups, we know we treat everybody the same here, right? You have the same option to do that. Here's the other thing that's really cool. Every single time an auditor runs a bot, right, they actually can come in and see the query that's pulling it. We prove to them zero trust. We prove to them the exact query that was used. If they question it, they can ask questions, right? They can raise a result, but they can't argue with this is how the data was collected, because we also give them that chain of custody side by side, that evidence record that tells them exactly what happened in that query, and it's all available to them. Okay. Last thing I want to do, and I'm going to be quiet, I want to show you how an audit is created. Okay. Because I think it's so powerful for you guys to see the world, the coming together of 2 parties in an audit, right? Let's take a typical vendor questionnaire here, right? And in this example, I'm going to come in and I want to go and I'm going to say, you know what? I'm a vendor. I want to audit Auditocity. Okay. I'm going to come in and I'm simply going to say, I want to create a new audit. And I'm going to call this an Apache audit of Auditocity. Okay. I'll just simply make that the description the same to make it easy. I simply say, I'm going to plan to start this thing today. I'm going to wrap it up. Maybe if this is a subscription, we're doing it every month, which I would highly encourage everyone to start thinking about. But I simply just come in and say, you know what, for that audit, I'm going to use my evidence request list. I'm going to pick the same one that we worked with for you guys, ATARC scenario 4. And what I'm going to say is, what's my look back period? Well, I want to audit you for June, right? I'm going to go June 1 to June 30. How did you perform in that experience? I'm going to pick my audit manager, the auditee who's running it for me on the auditee side. And luckily for you guys, it's me. I'm going to hit create. That's creating an audit. What happens on the other end, right? This is Jason White over here, kind of dueling pianos, if you will. I'm sitting here, I'm saying, oh, I just received another audit. Probably knew it was coming, but in the event that I didn't, it shows up on my dashboard. All I have to do is 2 things. I accept the invitation and I give them the scope that I'm willing to show them for our boundary, our Zero Trust Change Management Assessment boundary. I give them the scope based on the evidence request that they've asked. I hit save. The auditor says, okay, what all happened? Jason provided me a boundary. I can drill into that boundary, look at the products that they're giving me, right? And all I have to do I simply hit start. And as soon as I hit start, it says you checked all of the lists. In seconds, I now have that same list that I showed you before. And now I can go in and I can go drill to ADP. The evidence bot's automatically associated. It's there. Create an audit in a minute, start auditing in seconds. This is the world's most powerful audit data platform and risk management, risk reduction platform, I always like to call it, risk mitigation available. That certainly, again, I said it already once. I don't know why I'm being cheesy, that this man knows about. So I'm done. Sorry, I know I went a few minutes long, but hopefully that gives you kind of the full power, the breadth and the scope of everything that we're doing here, paying off Eric's great introduction. Eric?
Well, Jason, I would just wrap by saying, you talked about the power from an auditee perspective of having a single platform against all the different parties that audit you. And I think it's important for this group to understand that the same is true on the other side, right? Yeah. If I'm the Department of Defense and I'm looking at CMMC, how do I scale that possibly across, 300,000 members of the DIB, right? I could go in and centralize my logic, create a library for each of the levels of the CMMC one time, and go enable a bunch of C3PAOs and have that go across all 300,000. One time, one platform, one interface, right? And the last piece that I want to end with is that, in the power of the graph database, and we looked at all the detail, right? Certainly an auditor, an IG, an internal auditor, a 3PAO, for example, isn't going to go into that level of detail on everything. If there's a finding, they may. The point is it's there. They're going to audit the machine audit. In terms of the scope of what they need to answer, whether it's zero trust or whether it's full, FedRAMP High, for example. But all of that data, as Jason mentioned, the final piece of how powerful the graph database is, from all of those fields into creating a query, into the bots, into the data. While I may not interact with that every single day and look at every one across every audit, all that information, we are just one huge genomic API. It's available to be sent to a risk quant platform, an analytics platform, an AI/ML platform as a pre-validated, machine-validated kind of data catalog and context engine. So then we can start looking at, if I'm CISA looking at a global scale for national security, when it regards to cyber, being able to have one platform, one unified data model, machine validated, OSCAL ready to be pull in, the visibility that I can get across government, across an agency, across a, civilian population, whatever it may be, probably a different conversation, but it becomes extremely powerful. So with that, Chris and team, I don't know the typical format. Do we go with questions, or are we good to wrap?
Open it up to questions if anyone has.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're here, team. Appreciate everyone staying on and learn a little bit about the platform. Certainly, we can love to follow up and have conversations about how we're going to be progressing the lab with the ATARC team. But if there's any questions, fire away.
Looks like Trey has raised his hand.
Hi, this is Trey Carl. I'm the Deputy CISO from New Hampshire. I'm wondering if you've tailored your presentation. I know the power of the platform to be able to address a whole slew of different types of things in the realm of audits, risk mitigation, and continuous monitoring, expanding that. But from the perspective of a state government, have you narrowed down focus to SLTT or SLED with your offerings?
Yeah, great question, Trey. Appreciate that. The beauty of the platform is, as we kind of mentioned, is that as a neutral arbiter, right, we don't decide what people care about, what's the truth people want to see or the context, and we don't decide whether that truth was actually given or not, right? We just get the truth and put that in the hands so that people can make better decisions. So if you think about, SLED, for example, or think about how this translates into a state agency, while we haven't created logic for it, that's not really our role. We've got what we call the assessment collective. So in those public libraries or in a private library option that's coming, you can go in any set of questions, any framework that you have. We are agnostic to that. you can use that designer, or people on your behalf can use that designer to go in and centralize, any specific context that you want into the library, to then use that 1,000 times in 1,000, different audits of different parties if you wanted to. Does that make sense?
It does. I figured that would be the case, and thank you for your answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Jason, hopefully we were that thorough and not that boring.
Well, I think they said your part was boring, but mine wasn't. I don't know. I don't know about that. Well, we appreciate everybody's time, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we are here. I am just Vaughn, Vaughn at auditmation.io. Jason is J White at auditmation.io. And the website, as you've probably gathered, is auditmation.io. And I think Chris and the team have been kind enough. They sent out kind of the data sheet beforehand. We'll follow up with a link to the government page that talks more specifically about the Xero Trust use case, and are available for questions and conversations, and look forward to the opportunity to get more engaged through the lab and otherwise.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.